Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of The Other Side of Addiction. I am your host, Al Richards, and we got an incredible guest here today, one that I have been working on getting on the show, I think, for a year. Almost a year. We have our good friend, Mary Jo. So, Mary Jo, thank you for being here.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. Thank you. And thank you for being persistent in asking.
Oh, I am persistent. that's for sure.
I appreciate persistent people.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah. And just thank you so much. And you know, when Janan and I went to the trunk or treat that USARA was putting on, you and I chatted, and you were like, I know, I gotta get on. So thank you for not forgetting us.
Yeah, no,
really
for sure.
appreciate it.
Thank you. It's important.
Yeah. And we're joined again with my lovely wife, Janan. So, babe,
Hello.
thanks for being here. Really do appreciate it. And you're probably going to see a lot more of Janan on some of our shows, because with her schedule, she could actually come on our Thursday early
Morning
edition
shows.
show and co-host with me, which is great. So it's therapy for both of us, huh?
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And you keep looking at my hair. Do I have a flyaway?
Oh my gosh.
One day I will have a makeup girl
One right
that
there.
will take care of me. So, okay. Anyways, Sylvia's in the background going, "It's me! It's me!"
I can't wait.
I can't wait. So anyway, guys, thank you for being here with us today. And again, Mary Jo, oh my gosh, yeah, I think you and I met for the very first time at Recovery Day this past year,
No.
right? Wasn't it? Or it was before that?
We had a barbecue. You saw a
Oh,
barbecue
that's right.
in August.
That's right.
In August of last year.
Yeah.
At the one at Liberty,
At
right? Liberty Park.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and I heard a little bit more about your story and your background. But if you would share with our listeners just a little more about you, and we'll just kind of run from there, see where it goes. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you know, my name's Mary Jo McMillan, and I am. I think, you know, in this arena and what we're talking about is I'm a person who is in long-term recovery from addiction. And what that means exactly is I'm someone who hasn't used any alcohol or drugs to get high, self-medicate since September 16th of 1985.
Holy cow.
So 37 years.
My hell.
And with that being said, to give you context, I'm 61. And so I came into recovery at 24 years old. And it's been a lifetime of recovery, is what I would say, is now I have lived a lifetime of recovery over more than half of my life, nearly. You know, not more than half of my life, I guess. Well, let's see, 37 years? Yeah. Over half of my life now has been in recovery. Mm-hmm. And you know, as you live your life just as a human, you know, there's many experiences, but my experience for the last 37 years has really been very deeply connected to recovery community and the things that I find passionate about recovery. So it really is very much integrated in my life. And so where to start? I mean, somebody who came into recovery at 24, I was obviously a young person.
Yeah.
And I'm somebody who I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio. Grew up there. I was the oldest of 4 kids. My mom and dad, you know, young Catholic family. They were in their late mid-20s when they had me, and then, you know, 18 months later another one, and then 18 months later another one. You know, so they got 3 kids, 3 and under, which I couldn't do it. I think we gave them a run for their money for sure. And then when I was 9, my mom and dad, we had a 4th. So there's this spread, these three kids within 3 years, and then 6 years later you have this other baby. So my mom was a stay-at-home mom. She actually was an occupational therapist, and so she was a professional who also kind of changed her life to stay home with kids, and still worked 1 day a week, which is, as a child, I remember not liking. I was like, I don't want you to go to work. I want you to be home for me.
Yeah, right, right.
Kids are selfish. We
Yeah.
want that
Yeah,
security
they
of
can
our
be very
parents.
selfish.
And I would say that, she, great mom, and felt very loved as a child. And my dad was a traveling salesman, young guy, traveling salesman, kind of making his way in the world. He actually was the third child of some Irish immigrants that moved to the United States. And he had an older brother and sister. His parents were, people who did not make a lot of money and were just this humble Irish immigrant family. And my dad actually went to, he was a Korean War vet. So just after the Korean War, he was deployed when I think he was 17 or 18. So he was really just a young guy deployed to Korea. And though not during wartime, it was just this very different experience. And growing up in our family, I think my parents just tried to make their way in building a family. But my dad came from alcoholism, and so did my mother. So that's kind of some of setting the stage. My mom grew up with two alcoholic parents, country club, kind of more well-to-do, but not necessarily just an incredible amount of wealth. But they had some resources, and my mom's dad was actually an orphan, and my mom lived with her parents, who eventually passed away. She took care of him. And then my dad's parents, he lost his dad when I was 2 years old. So but I grew up knowing most of my grandparents.
Yeah.
So I really had, I think, a fairly normal childhood. And one of the challenges, though, that happened in my life was my parents really struggled in their relationship. I think many people do, working out marriage and raising kids.
It's a full-time job in itself,
it's a
right?
full-time job, and there is, there's just, who we are as individuals, and we come together to try to form a relationship, and that's a lot of work.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
and
it
I
is.
actually think they did well in raising children and in loving us. The two of them, not so well. And I, and some of what, they've shared with me was alcoholism played a part of it, and, dad checking out, mother being hyper unhappy. I mean, she was not a happy person. I think she was happy about her kids, but not happy. So grew up in this kind of contentious marriage, and eventually it ended, and it ended when I was 21. But before that, I think as a teenager, I started running around with friends and drinking and partying, and starting at 14, and that was kind of my, looking back on what we know now as my self-medication. I had, my own stress as a result of what we would call a dysfunctional family. How do I cope? They're not coping well. I'm not coping well. And my siblings we're all doing the best we can, right? But, one of the relief and relief that I found was, I thought, in fun, which was getting high, smoking marijuana, and drinking, and excited to drink as an underage person, because it just was exciting. So I had something that seemingly brought me pleasure, versus kind of some of the chaos and discomfort that was already kind of happening to me internally and mentally and emotionally.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So, when you started drinking, you said, what did you say? Just to kind of self-medicate? But do you think that part of it was you learned it from your parents? You saw them doing it, and so you thought, okay, well, that's their way out, so maybe I should try it? Was that...
I was around it, so I wasn't concerned about it, and there was more permission to drink, and I didn't get in trouble for it, right? My parents were concerned after I was a little bit older and some things started changing in my behavior. And they didn't know half of what was going on, because you don't tell your parents.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Of course.
Yeah,
we were doing
right.
speeders, and then we were smoking pot, and so doing drugs. You're not you're not seeing that. I think my mom and
Yeah.
dad, they were aware that I smoked pot, and I had my boyfriend who would come over and spend the night. And I was a young teenager. I don't think they knew how to set some limits and boundaries.
Yeah.
And so I think it was a little bit more lax in my home, and so I kind of had some freedom to do what I want. But what started to happen, so I think their drinking may have just kind of left them not as maybe not as capable of kind of paying attention to some things that they needed to control more,
Yeah.
and if you saw it from my mother's point of view, she probably would be feeling like the burden was on her while my dad was away, and my dad would come home and he's like, what do you want me to do? He's kind of checking out too.
Yeah.
So not abusive people, though my dad had a short fuse sometimes, and but like I said, I felt loved, and I think my siblings did as well. But the family fell apart. The family fell apart, and my youngest sister really kind of experienced most of that falling apart. Her older siblings were using drugs and partying, and then her family falls apart. So, I think there was that wreckage that happened. Well, I left Cincinnati at the age of 21. I had been working on my own. I didn't go to college. I got out of high school, and it was like, what? I'd rather just have a job and party. I mean, I really did. It was just like, okay,
Yeah.
it was. I had a boyfriend. That's how I did it. And I don't remember a lot of encouragement from my parents. And this is where I think they just were a little bit more lax, is to go to college. What was the next step for me to be successful in my own life? Didn't have that kind of support to do it.
Yeah.
See, and I wonder how many of us really do, because I was brought up kind of the same way, that if you don't want to go to college, or you can't go, you don't want to go in the military, you go get a job.
Right.
And you go get a job and you stay there till you retire, right? That's basically the mentality that I was brought up in. And I did the same thing. I mean, graduated when I was 17, and I started working construction. And after about 2 months of working construction, after we graduated, they were shutting down Salt Lake, and they wanted to send some people to Colorado. And man, my freaking hand was up. I'm like, hell yeah, I'm getting the hell out of this freaking house, because I'm tired of getting in trouble for stuff, and I'm going to go out and live my own life. And I didn't even start smoking pot till 2 weeks, well, actually spring break, right before we graduated. Went up to ski resorts, had some buddies that worked up there, and we decided, I smoked it out of a pop can, when you made a bowl out of a pop can.
I do remember.
And I'm like, well, this is some pretty cool stuff. And I don't know if I was really hiding any kind of damage. If I really go back and think about it, I probably was, because I was in trouble all the time. I learned how to be a really good liar and a manipulator, because I had to, or I was getting my ass kicked from my dad. So I learned how to maneuver around that, and that could have been some of it. And smoking that pot, kind of like, whew, I don't really give a shit what happens now, right?
Actually, that's kind of true. That's the effect it has, and so it feels easier.
Right.
And so, that self-medication, it wasn't purposeful. It was just, it was available, and it worked.
Yeah.
I mean, in some ways.
Yeah.
And it was part of the culture. I mean, it's part of that culture growing up, too. Yeah. Especially if your parents, if you're able to kind of get around your parents' observation, and now we ask parents to be more engaged.
Yeah.
But and the interesting thing was both my parents had completed college, but as their oldest child, there wasn't this kind of next step that I remember. And maybe, from what I'm remembering, maybe I pushed back. But my choice was to not.
Yeah.
And so, I just went to work and partied more. And actually, I had a boyfriend that was using, and he was a dealer, not big time cartel or anything like that. It was just, where pot and, downers and barbiturates and cocaine. I mean, a lot of illicit drugs.
Yeah. But those were the popular ones back in those days.
Those were the popular party drugs.
Yeah.
And I indulged in all of them. So here I am, and at the same time, and this is what I would say, just as I graduated high school, I put on some weight, but then both my sister and I struggled with eating disorders, and that was the time too, where anorexia and bulimia were kind of in the culture of young women, and I got it. I got it, and I owned it, and I struggled with first anorexia and then bulimia. And ultimately, 21, my boyfriend moved to Houston, and he didn't take me with him, and my heart was broken. However, it was like the understanding was eventually you'll come. But at that point, your heartbreak and whatever, and like any good defiant party girl, I acted out, and so I think I began my own kind of destruction of things that I might have been that I would have valued, which was this relationship. So that changed, and I became more of a party girl, and then I eventually moved to Texas. And when I got to Texas, it was a very different environment than I had grown up in. I'm away from my parents, I'm away from friends, and I'm this technically grown up at 21, though it didn't feel like it. Working now, and I went to work for an oil company.
Did you go to Texas by yourself?
I went to join him.
Oh, okay.
And I did, but that blew up very quickly because as soon as I started to get into the work environment, it was guys in the oil trading business, and we were out partying and drinking, and things get real sloppy. Sexual promiscuity, drinking, not coming home, and that ended my relationship very quickly. And so I was very seduced into this kind of environment of money and drugs and and attention. That's what I would say. I was getting a lot of attention, and there was this validation for a girl with low self-esteem, mostly getting a lot of attention from a lot of different components, and I was all in. I mean, not even thinking it through. And my identity became more about how pretty I was, how much fun I was, how much I partied, how sexy I could be, and it wasn't, and I lost a sense of who I was, and I struggled still with the bulimia, trying to get thin as I could, and so by the time I was 24, things did not, I did not look very well, and my parents were more concerned. My dad came out for a visit. I would call my mom while I was, high or using cocaine up all night, really kind of trying somehow to connect what was familiar, which was security of family, which I was not away. I was away from. I was on my own essentially.
And you were doing that because you knew you needed it, right? But
I really
yet
need it.
You still wasn't at the place you needed to be.
No, and I had no tether. I had no way to kind of ground myself, and it got worse. And so I ended up getting what I would say very sick, and I was using heavy cocaine. I was smoking cocaine. I was drinking. I wasn't able to show up for work on Monday. My weight went down to about 90 pounds.
Wow.
So I looked really sick, but I still thought I was pretty sexy.
Yeah.
I was going to the disco bars and I was dancing.
Yeah.
I think 90 pounds and your hip bone sticking out looks really sexy, but it's really sick.
Yeah.
It was not well.
Yeah.
And so my mom had and sister had come out, and my sister and brother came out, and that didn't. And my sister was with me now. She moved out. We were using together, and that didn't feel good either. So things started to progressively deteriorate, and my mom gave me a brochure to an eating disorder program that had been in Florida. I knew things were not going well with my boyfriend, and I was a disaster, and so I made arrangements and ended up going to eating disorder treatment in Florida. So the change is when I got there, they did a drug screen, and they said, "Oh, well, wait a minute. We have an additional problem going on. We have a substance use disorder. They called it chemical dependency." Mm-hmm. And so they also had a chemical dependency program, which they said, "We want you to do both programs because you have a serious drug and alcohol problem." And I really was I was surprised. That's not why I'm here.
Did it make you upset though when they were saying that? Because I know a lot of times when someone says something like that to us, right? You're like, no, you're effing wrong, right? You got your head up your butt.
I think what I thought is how could I be?
Right.
I'm such, that's not me. I'm not, and this is where stigma comes in. I'm not a drug addict.
Right.
And I think that was the first time that I had to look at something rather, seeing it that it was addiction and actually being in treatment program for a serious addiction that was harming my life and my well-being. In addition to this behavioral eating disorder, I also had a lot of substances on board. The only thing I went through kind of smaller withdrawals, especially with alcohol. I would wake up with the flu a lot. Never even occurred to me that was hangovers and a change in tolerance that was happening for me, because I was balancing it between stimulants and downers, barbiturates and alcohol. So I was doing so many things that overdose was, not even something I would have considered, because that happens to drug addicts. Did not see myself as a person who was a drug addict or an alcoholic even. Yet this is what they're proposing. So it was a bit of an interesting thing to start to face, and that it was a 12-step program. So they introduced me to the 12 steps, and immediately started to have me go to 12-step meetings. And so what I would say is, during that experience of 8 weeks, that's all that I was there, I bought in. I think my life was so chaotic, and it needed this radical change. And so I said, I'm going to do everything they tell me to do. And I think that's that kind of perfectionism, and I want to do it, and I want to be really good at it, because I was so lost previously. So, I mean, I think I just went along, and actually I've stayed in recovery ever since that.
No.
And I struggled with some eating disorder issues early on in my recovery, for sure. And that over time, started, I got some therapy, and those things started to help more in how I felt about myself. It wasn't just about my body, my looks, my inside, which I think is a lot of what women struggle with. As a woman in recovery, it's that struggling with who am I, in this package, as opposed to what's going on inside. And so, and it's been a journey ever since.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it would be a journey, and my gears are turning here with questions for you. But I understand we got to take a quick commercial break right now. So, guys, stay with us. We're going to be right back, and we're going to talk more about Mary Jo's story here, and where it's taken her life, because this is going to be interesting. So stay with us.
Hello, my friends. This is Brad Neufeld, and I want to thank you for tuning in to the Resilience Talk Network. You can listen to my show, Resilience, every morning, Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. On my show, we will be discussing what it takes for you to overcome the day-to-day challenges that all of us face in life, as well as some of the devastating ones that may lead us to feelings of hopelessness and despair. It's my goal to provide you with the tools and skills that you need to overcome anything that is thrown your way. To find out more about my show, visit our website at www.resiliencetalk.com. That's www.resiliencetalk.com. And as always, until we meet again, go for everything that you want in life and make it happen.
Do you know someone who's gambling with death due to an addiction? Do you know someone whose life is being turned upside down due to a loved one that's battling with addiction? Hi, I'm Al Richards. I am the host of the Other Side of Addiction podcast. I started the podcast due to my wife's battle with alcohol. Let's just say I became addicted to her addiction. Our podcast is helping people understand a little more about those who have battled addiction and those who are hurting from their addiction. Through raw vulnerability, we share stories that help uncover the root causes of addiction. Shame felt on both sides, matter of the conscious and subconscious mind, continued beliefs, and often confusing paths of recovery. We collaborate with real people and their stories, as well as licensed professionals, to help our audience gain a better understanding of addiction. You can find us on Resilience Talk Network. You can also find us on Facebook at Mr. Al Richards. That's Facebook at Mr. Al Richards. You can also find us on YouTube. Just look up the Other Side of Addiction podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Other Side of Addiction. We're here with our special guest, Mary Jo. Again, Mary Jo, thank you so much for being here. And my lovely wife is joining us today as the guest co-host. So thank you, babe, for being here.
Welcome.
Greatly appreciate it. On the first half of the show, Mary Jo, you were sharing your journey about being a little kid, growing up. I mean, kind of started partying at the age of 14. You started talking about your eating disorder. And during the break, we were talking about it. I don't think a lot of people realize that's even an addiction.
Mm-hmm.
So you were just not battling the drugs and the alcohol, which again, at the time, you didn't think you were
battling.
Yeah, you were battling, because I did the same thing. You know, I had my weekend bout with cocaine and alcohol and only did it 2 days a week, so I don't have a problem. You know, it's not every day. I still have my job. When your mom gave you that pamphlet and you went to that place for eating, how long did it take you to realize, oh my gosh, this is an addiction too? Or did you even look at it as an addiction?
I didn't until I got to treatment there.
Okay.
What I knew is it was my dirty secret. I was very much in secret, very shame based about it. Bulimia is binging on food and then purging it. So it was very much this gross thing that people would be aghast if they knew what I was doing.
Yeah.
Right.
And yet here my weight was going down. That was happening, but I would say some of what arrested my bulimia was cocaine use. Was cocaine and crystal. We didn't call it meth, we called it crank. And I was doing.
I did crank.
Yeah, we did
times,
crank.
yeah.
So we were doing.
So that's what crank is. I always wondered.
So
'Cause I've heard that for
it's
years,
changed. The drug has changed too. But I was doing. So I was doing barbiturates, pot, cocaine, crank, speeders if they were around, whatever was around, I was doing it to level things out. And I would say that that stimulant use kept me from the binging and purging because I wasn't hungry.
Well, yeah,
and
'cause
I
you
was
don't wanna
losing
eat.
weight. Right.
Yeah.
So I knew I had the eating disorder. And it was, and it had been in the news and prevalent, and it was my secret. And I did not want anybody to know, and I also didn't want to stop because also I had been a higher weight. When I graduated high school, I'd gotten up to about 140 pounds. And of course, I don't want to be a heavy person. I don't want to be fat, and so this body image stuff. And so addiction, it becomes, and this is part of addiction, is compulsion. I started to have this compulsion and obsession with my weight and how I would identify myself. So, and that is addiction. It's the compulsion to do something that's harming you, that becomes such a conditioned response that you become powerless over it. I mean, that's how we identify addiction.
Pretty
I was
much.
powerless to stop it, saying each day, I'm not going to binge and purge today. I'm not going to binge and purge. And meanwhile, I'm drinking, I'm smoking pot. So those were my intermittent, those were more of the better part of what was going on. The eating disorder was horrible, but, I was getting relief for my eating disorder with my substance use.
Yeah.
So I had this, vicious cycle that was going on, and all I knew is that, I really just had a bad relationship with my boyfriend. That's what was really occurring to me.
Yeah.
So I went to a therapist working on what's the relationship with my boyfriend, and, how come he doesn't love me enough, or why is he, and what was happening is, I'm falling apart. So, and when I got there and they started to identify this as a disorder, in the beginning there was some relief. There was relief because it was like I wanted the insanity to stop, but I had no idea how to do it, although I thought I did. Because I remember when they said, we want you to stay longer for this chemical dependency program, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to have enough time to stay in this program because I only signed up for this amount of week, this amount of time. I think they were talking 8 weeks versus 6 weeks. And I was like, yeah, I didn't think so. So again, I'm having my own kind of idea about what it is I think I need, when I'm a complete loss for what to do. Yeah. And, so I got some, what I would say in a treatment program, and this is what treatment is, and we'll continue. I've been a treatment counselor, a licensed treatment counselor, and been working in the treatment field and recovery for 35 years. And at that time, what it was an education. The 12-step information and engagement in meetings, and skills about how to start to learn to love yourself and care about yourself and change your behaviors. I started to get that education about addiction, about how it affects the brain, how it affects the body, both with the behavioral stuff that was going on with an eating disorder, and substance use. And I really started to identify with the fact that my drug and alcohol use had been considerably debilitating, that I truly felt a powerlessness over it. And I hated cocaine, but I did it a lot, because it had the effects that I wanted.
Yeah.
Then time with my boyfriend, immediate effect right away. It wasn't a slower effect,
Right.
especially with pot, which I love marijuana. Marijuana still would be my drug of choice. Alcohol and marijuana would be my drugs of choice. And, and I even was doing Xanax because I was, they said you had anxiety. Well, hell yeah, I had anxiety. I had a lot of drugs.
I'm doing all this shit.
You're doing uppers
cocaine,
and downers.
no
It's like,
kidding.
and actually they diagnosed me with bipolar disorder.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm not bipolar. But my behavior with stimulants and downers, that's what it looks like. And so there's the mental health piece. It's all just in this bucket of chaos of substance use, emotional and mental difficulty and struggle, eating disorder. And how do you begin to untangle that?
Yeah.
Treatment is the beginning. And so treatment begins this journey where you arrest kind of the chaos, you arrest the difficulty that's going on, get some education, and hopefully gain some insight about kind of, as we call it, the insanity that's going on. And that really happened for me. So coming out of treatment, I went from Florida to a very, cushy environment. It was a nice treatment center. They had a pool and a tennis court and all the nice entity that you get sometimes in, a lot of times in private treatment.
Yeah.
And went back to Texas. And when I got back to Houston, I went right away to meetings. And I started to do kind of the things they prescribed. Go to meetings, start to, continue to work on, your interpersonal life, find a higher power. And I did that diligently. I went to a meeting every single day. It was just that lifeline for me. My sister still struggled with using. We separated. She moved out, and but I really stayed on my path. And the boyfriend that I had at the time, I decided no longer to see him. I was trying not to see him. I don't know that I decided. I was trying to figure out how to save him.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, trying to take care of myself. What I would tell you is I had I had an abrupt intervention when he died of an overdose when I was a month out of treatment. He was just shy of his 32nd birthday, and he and I had talked and met a couple times, and I was really keeping the distance, but he died of a heart attack related to cocaine. And so for me, I was 3 months sober, a month out of treatment, and all of a sudden things got real, that you really die from this illness. So I think for me, that was the catalyst that truly changed for me.
Yeah, I was just going to ask that, was that like a wake up call
it
for
was.
you?
It was
Big
very
one.
much. And I think because at that point it was like I was in that with him. I was the one oftentimes hooking up with the dealer, getting the drugs, bringing it to him. And the fact that I went to treatment, I no longer, was getting him the drugs. He was getting them on his own now. But he also paid for me. He also made the down payment for me to go to treatment.
Wow.
He paid $1,000 for me to go when I didn't have it. So in many ways, I think he kind of wanted to get rid of me because I was pretty chaotic. I think he wanted me to go away for a while and chill out.
And in a way too, that was your first stepping stone too, right?
It was.
Yeah.
And so that was that. I think I clung harder to recovery because it was such a tragedy. Boy, I can tell you now, I've seen that tragic loss. If I were to be emotional about anything, that kind of loss with people that I have cared about, treated, who have been in my close family circle, in my work and friends, we've lost a lot of lives as a result of addiction. So for me, that's where I become passionate, and I think my career as a substance use counselor has been my greatest passion, is to help as many people as we all can to and help people understand that this illness is devastating. We lose lives. We lose our freedom. We lose our happiness. We lose our families unintentionally. unintentionally. We don't intend for it to
you
go
don't
like
want
that.
it to happen.
No,
Of course not.
No, and I think, I would say, I want to go back to this because I think it's really important in the rest of my story is when I went to treatment, I had some resources. Even though I didn't have a lot of money, I did have some help. My grandmother paid my rent. My sister still lived at the apartment that we were at. And when I came out, I was able to go back to my job. I did not have a criminal record. So I had a lot of things that we call now kind of recovery capital. I had assets that helped me as a young 24-year-old get back on my feet and get better. I had health insurance. I had the ability to go see a therapist. I had those resources. I still had a car. I still had a driver's license. I still had a lot of resources. If I didn't have a car and a driver's license to get to meetings, I don't know that I would have made it. There was just those things that were available to help me get better. Right. And as a substance use counselor, working both in private treatment and in treatment programs that are funded with public dollars, there's a lot of people who come, especially coming in through the criminal justice system, that have too many barriers, or that grew up with homes where their parent was a substance user, but also didn't have resources. So I see a lot of people who come from a lower income and poverty environment where they didn't have the opportunity and resources to get better. And especially with criminal justice barriers. People have been arrested for substance use. That was me. It just didn't happen during those times. And the war on drugs came right after I got sober. Or I would have gotten the same thing.
Yeah, you would have been in the same system.
I would have been a product of the system. It's really hard to recover when you have all those kind of burdens on your back. I had some emotional stuff to deal with, but I didn't have a tremendous amount of trauma and those kind of burdens on my back. I still had stuff I had to work through. So I really feel like I had some advantages that supported me to maintain my recovery long term that I see so many people do not have. And so that's been my passion. And as a treatment counselor, when I became a treatment counselor, which was not my intended career, but it was what I felt passionate about because I was so passionate about my own recovery, I wanted to share it with others. So I went to school. I got a certificate as a drug and alcohol counselor. So I did do some college. I did a year of college. And then I went to work. I was able to work in treatment programs and have loved it and have also gotten burnout. And I have over 35 years, watched my growth in this work, both personally and professionally, and recovery just kind of being the beacon of hope and healing, which has always been true. Recovery is truly so important because it really happens among us, right?
Yes.
It happens between us.
Yeah.
All the treatment, all the systematic, all the dollars, all that's all a catalyst to help it happen. But what happens are the relationships that we share in recovery. And that's why I'm so passionate about the people in recovery, because we're the healers. We're the healers.
Amen. And I like to put it this way.
We were just talking about this yesterday, kind of.
Yeah, I like to put it this way, that really the people in recovery are the angels. And the reason why I say that, and our listeners have heard me say this a lot, and it's because I like using it. We had a guest on our show out of Arizona. She's 19 years clean. She now has a 30-year-old son who's battling a heroin addiction. And she's just like a lot of parents or even spouses. Every time the phone rings, you're afraid it's that call that you're dreading to hear, that you've lost your loved one, right? And she said she was talking to a friend at church one day, and her friend said, "This is how I see it." She goes, "There are those who lose their battle, and God knows that battle's just way, way, way too tough for them, so he brings them back home, so they have some peace. The ones that are able to find their way through that darkness and get themselves on the other side, those are basically his angels, like his disciples. Now they're out spreading the word, and they're out helping others walk that same path, and how it's still tough. There's still a lot of people who lose their battle. Mm-hmm. However, even being new to this whole thing myself, I'm starting to hear more and more stories too, where people are like, they're getting it, right? And they get what life is about, and they understand the spiritual part of things, whether their higher power is God, the universe, a mountain, a goldfish, a rock, whatever it may be, but they're getting it. And so I've shared many times in the studio that this is what I love about doing what I'm doing, because I get to be surrounded by so many amazing people on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. And Janan and I, we were just talking about this yesterday.
Yeah, it's amazing
how
to us
blessed we are.
The friends that we have now are better than, I mean, it's just amazing. You can count on them. You know they're going to be where they say they're going to be. I mean, we've had good friends in the past, but it's not like it is now, because we share this connection of
That's right.
recovery.
That's right.
Yeah.
The deeper connection. It really is
deep.
this heartfelt. We know we've struggled, and we have this deep gratitude for this journey of hope.
Yeah.
And things do get better, even when they get hard, and even sometimes when they're most difficult. There's still something you can hang on to, and if you can connect with another person who's your coach, your cheerleader, your sponsor, your advocate, your spiritual guide, what that person is, in the down times, in the difficult times, if you have that relationship. My best friends had dinner last night with my two very best friends I've been in recovery with for 35 years. And, we used to be these young women, and now we're these over 60. One's almost there. We're going to celebrate her birthday, in Mexico.
Well, that's awesome.
And that's what we do. We celebrate ourselves. We have truly celebrated each other throughout our lives, and that's been our cornerstone, our recovery with each other. And I think that when you find that, you find this familial support system, and that is what's critical. And that's why I love recovery community. It has grown in Utah. It's grown nationally. That what I experienced early on in 12-step fellowship became even more expansive for me in a lot of ways, and that's why I love this opportunity. Having been person in treatment, I can remember saying, we used to have just aftercare programs, but it was like we need something bigger, And when I was introduced to this concept of what I get to do now as the executive director of USARA. So I probably should say what USARA is. Should I?
Yeah. Let people
Can
know
I give a
what
little
USARA is.
promo?
Oh,
Yes.
absolutely.
So USARA is the Utah Support Advocates for Recovery Awareness, and we are a nonprofit, peer-run recovery community organization. And it's a non-clinical organization that really kind of our board of directors and our bylaws are made up of people in recovery. So it's this understanding of who we are and what we do is based on those of us who've had the experience of addiction. Alcohol and drug addiction, individuals and family members and allies, people who are affected, that we are the people who want to say what happens to us and how it happens to us. We don't want it prescribed. We don't want it court ordered, though those things have happened to many of us. But how do we cope with that? How do we get through it? But how do we get through it with this common connection to say, yeah, I get it. It's really tough today. How can I help you? How can I support you?
Yeah.
What is it you need? And also maybe I say, there's no other way to get around that hard time. But you can get through it, and it's going to be hard, So we don't mince words either,
Yeah.
So
I have to say that USARA, I brag about it all the time. I think on every show. I love what you guys do. You all have inspired me and made me feel at home every time I go in. Every single one of you, and I just love the environment, the
environment
of being at USARA, or
the support, the
talking.
love.
Yes,
Yeah.
It's just they're amazing people. If you need help, please look them up and go to them, because I always say this all the time. If it wasn't for USARA, I wouldn't be sober today.
Well, you're part of us because you volunteer and you
Yep.
show up for our events, and that's
Yeah.
just it. USARA really is an us thing. You know, it really is. It is bigger than, you know, a lot of people say, well, didn't you start USARA? Actually, I didn't. I was part of a board of actually a quick kind of synopsis, because I think it'll be pertinent to the work that we, you know, that what I want to talk about
Right.
how did this organization develop. So one thing is it developed out of people in recovery. You know, I just happened to be that person in recovery who had some leadership and passion and ability to kind of take my place there, right? So we, in working in the treatment field for a long time, we also talked with the State Division of Substance Use and Mental Health, and there is a person at the division who was taking on a new role too as the deputy director. His name's Brent Kelsey, and Brent, you know, along with the administrator and his bosses, you know, they were asking what he wanted to do in the substance use side, and he had come from his own work in, I think, drug courts and some of the services that happened in Salt Lake County. Then he, now at a state level, said we need to bring people with this experience of recovery and who have struggled with their own addiction. They need to be heard. They need to be the voices at the table when we're making decisions about them. He invited us to the table, and so he got with a lot of us who were also working in the substance use treatment field and just said, you guys know people in recovery, because he knew we also practice it in our personal lives. He said, we want to start this kind of advocacy work. And it was similar to what the mental health organization NAMI was doing, National Alliance for Mental Illness. And they were advocates at the table, and he wanted to see that happen on the substance use side. So he asked us all to come together, and so with some of our friends, and we brought them in from, you know, the meetings and said, what do we want to do? And we really had to do some education about what we would do. We didn't know. So really USARA started out as the Substance Abuse Recovery Alliance. We called it SARA Utah. And SARA Utah, and we wanted it to be an alliance it was an advocacy group. And so we all came together, then we established the nonprofit, and it was really intended to be voices for recovery. And at that time, I got the opportunity to be on the board. And then we a few years, and we actually had a first director that we hired, and with just a small grant that we had, who was connected with how to kind of facilitate relationships with legislators. So he was actually somebody who was interested. He had a master's in business, and his name was Casey Hill, and he started this. We supported him as a board of directors to start to educate legislators about addiction recovery, and also bring the voices of people with recovery to the table. So that was what he was doing. And he started, believe it or not, he's the one who started the Rally for Recovery up at the state capitol.
Holy cow.
And we all supported it. So, you know, it's kind of this person who's no longer involved with us who started this. And so it has had this evolution from some support from the state of Utah, Office of Substance Use and Mental Health, and then also having this person who kind of put the policies and procedures together, and some of the things that we were doing as advocates. We actually then changed the name to Utah Support Advocates for Recovery Awareness. We wanted to take the word substance abuse out, because abuse was really negative about we wanted to change some of the language we were using. We didn't want to say substance abusers and addicts. We wanted to start to grow this awareness and reduce the stigma about these people who are criminals, these addicts who behave badly, and we really needed that to change. We had such a kind of the war on drugs and the criminal justice movement that we were arresting everybody, you know, for possession of their personal substances.
And it's still going on.
Still going
much.
on.
Yeah.
We've improved a lot, and so people saw that, and they were saying this has to change, including people in law enforcement. Everybody was saying this is not working.
Yeah, it doesn't.
So how do you fight systems and policies that need to change? You bring the voices of people in recovery and experience to the table. Yeah. And that was really what started us out. And so the opportunity has been I think, well received among legislators and government officials. And certainly there's pushback, but I would say that we have had a significant momentum as people who are treatment providers, people in recovery, to really start to have a voice about what kind of services are needed. And we're still working really hard because we have a huge deficit about what's needed, especially with housing. Barriers to housing, criminal records that create, a no starter for people to get a job or a safe place to live. And if you do not have a job or a safe place to live, it's going to be really hard to stay to arrest your substance misuse and addiction in order to start, because you have to start to feel better. And if you don't have a roof over your head or you have a way to pay for your groceries and transportation, you're not going to feel better. So you struggle, and the coping mechanism that you can get right now is a substance. So we have to really change the kind of resources and make recovery capital available for everyone to get better, much like it happened for me.
Janan and I just did a show as a matter of fact, it just came out this week.
Don't get on the soapbox, okay?
Okay, I will get on, because I can eat pretty easily. But we just did a show how the system is broken. The system is set up to fail. I mean, that's how I just see it, and it's like when Janan was going through her recovery and getting arrested and going through all the crap she did. I mean, she had to go in for a weekly UA. She had her probation, and all this costs money, right? Well, how do you expect them to pay for it when they can't get a job because their record? So it's like we get them in this system, and basically it's just a circle, because they end up going right back to the same thing again, because they're like, well, why should I work so hard to get my act together when society won't even allow me to get my act together, right? I mean, they need help, right? We all need help.
Right.
We all need some direction. We all need a hand to help us get through whatever we're getting through. We can't do it alone. I mean, hell, even just people who don't battle addiction, we can't go through life alone. We need support.
Right.
Yeah, everybody,
And it's broken. It's completely broken.
And you're right. It has been. It has been broken. And I think that's when we got the opportunity, 14, and oh my gosh, do the math, 2006, 18 years ago, to start this advocacy work here, particularly in Utah, but it's also started nationally. Because, kind of circling back to when I became, I left the treatment center that I had been working for 3.5 years to become the director of USARA. And I didn't know what I was doing. All I knew is I was going to do something. I was going to make some change happen, and I had an opportunity to do it, because I really wanted. I was content to be continuing as a treatment counselor and manage a part of a treatment program, but this opportunity came about, and I said, okay. Well, what I did is I had to educate myself, and there was a national organization called Faces and Voices of Recovery. And there was this growth to start. They started to do marches in New York City, and then we went to Washington, D.C. And it wasn't just the marches. It was they started to talk about advocacy on a policy level, to say, here's the things that we need to do, being the voices of people in recovery, to change how the system has what has happened in the system with it being broken. And then truly we saw it was broken. So we started to have our voices to say, we can't arrest our way out of this. We can't punish a way out of this. We have to put money and resources and support to help people get better. And actually, we could see this in fellowship and 12-step recovery, and that was certainly an experience I had with fellowship and community. But also, you get people who are court ordered into those programs, and I'm like, yeah, that's not for me. I got it shoved down my throat. I don't want to do it. And we had to figure out how to help people and meet them where they were at. So the voices really were important. So I learned a lot from other organizations that were actually got grant money from the federal substance use services, SAMHSA. So it's Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. So it's where the federal dollars come from to each of the states. And each of the states, those are public dollars that are intended to treat substance use. So I started to look at what was happening there and how do we get more help right?
Yeah.
And the dollars were limited because we didn't have Medicaid expansion. And so there were policies about criminal justice, so we started to work on criminal justice reform and expungement laws and making those changes here in Utah. And then we also started to advocate for Medicaid expansion, that we needed Medicaid to, at the time, people with substance use were eligible, but we weren't getting Medicaid because it wasn't expanded to have people with substance use who oftentimes were just coming out of incarceration. We couldn't get them to have this Medicaid because there was also a limit of how many people we were going to bring into the Medicaid pool. So we really had to, in Utah, fight for the expansion of Medicaid, and it came about initially to help people who were homeless, had criminal justice background, and also mental health and substance use. So we started to make those changes, and legislators were seeing it. They started to see, yeah, we've got to do something different. So they did start to help vet the changes that needed to be made.
Started poking the holes.
They did. And you had some legislators that were very much for this healthcare reform that we were putting on. We're already working on criminal justice reform. But you couldn't do criminal justice reform if you didn't do healthcare reform and help give a mechanism for people to get medical care, behavioral health treatment, and we had these huge waiting lists for people to get into treatment. Public dollars couldn't cover it. So we had to expand the care that we were going to give people. And the only way to do that was give them health insurance. And so it was a fight. It had to go to a public ballot. It had to be voted on as a proposition. So and the proposition got voted on, and we were able to expand Medicaid. But then it had to go back to legislation. So really, the point being, how do we change the system?
Right.
Yes.
The voices. Not everybody's going to really understand it, and I can remember myself at one time saying, I don't even care if I vote, or I don't even care about the legislature. I don't know anything about it. I educated myself. I wanted to make sure that I knew more so that I could affect change. And what I would tell you, like for instance, we have some pretty great things happening with expungement. We have clean slate where all these misdemeanors are getting automatically getting expunged. We started that work 12 years ago. And it started to come to fruition. And I would say USARA was part of that work, along with legislators, along with other treatment providers. We all started to work together to get this change. Yeah. And then, you have some really champions that come out and that start to do that work more specifically. And we got to partner with Noella Sudbury with RASA, who started cleanslate.org, and now she's with another organization called RASA that works to help people get their records expunged, have more affordable, legal help, and also understands us as people who have been overburdened by the criminal justice system, and we're trying to change that so that people now can have their records cleared and expunged. So we're making progress.
Yeah.
And so this broken system, back to the broken system, we're repairing it. But it's a long time to repair how much was broken. We have a long way to go. And I will say the Voices for Recovery, us, people like us, you sharing your story, saying, these are some things that helped me. USARA, people that I've met, there's, I would say, more recovery, small grassroots recovery organizations and people doing what USARA started to do all throughout the state now, throughout the nation. But in our state, there's a lot of these, the community of people in recovery who are putting together recovery workout gyms. We know all their names, right? Well, we're beginning to, and you'll probably have them all on your show. Yep. And they're doing work and activities in the community with each other to build community, to have a voice, to have a presence, and we're healing each other. I mean, we really are. Treatment is important. The criminal justice system, I think, is buying into Department of Corrections. They know that we have got to change. Yeah. So the more, and they invite us to the table now. We never used to get invited. We get to say, when somebody calls me and says, Mary Jo, I need you to come to this Department of Corrections stakeholders meeting. Well, my role as a leader is, I've never been incarcerated, but let me bring an expert. is I find the person who has had that experience, who has gone through incarceration, who actually spent time not just in jail but in prison, and I bring that person to that table with me. Say, this is the person you need to listen to.
Absolutely, right? Yeah.
You can hear me, but she's going to tell you, she or he is going to tell you exactly what needs to change. And so I've been in this fortunate role to have the voice to say, let me help you find the expert, because I know a lot of people who have this lived experience. And so if somebody has that particular experience, my role is to bring them to the table.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I think we also developed our services to bridge a gap, because people weren't having to wait to get to treatment. They were struggling still with continued substance use. And how do we help somebody connect to recovery? Also when they're still using. When they're still using a substance because it's because they're in an addiction, but yet we don't want them mistreated. We don't want them turned away. We don't want to say, well, you're not doing it right. And we really wanted to create this kind of opening for people to have more support, whether it was harm reduction. It was, and more people were getting involved to say, we need to do harm reduction. We need to have needle exchange. We need naloxone. We need opiate overdose rescue. So all of us started to come together, and more voices. Oh
yeah, it's the snowball is building. You know, I've only been in this realm really for a short period of time compared to like yourself and other people at USARA and the Other Side Academy, Janan. And just in the short time I've been a part of this, I've already started to see some growth. And it's so cool to see that. I mean, I've gone to events that USARA has put on, and you go out there and there's, 5 or 6 other recovery centers out there joining forces with you guys.
Right.
And it's building. And to see the people who are involved with this, and one of my big things when we started this show, one mission out of quite a few that it's building up as I'm doing more of this is to get rid of that stigma. Mm-hmm. And I've even thought sometimes I'd like to do like a lineup and just grab people who are in recovery and who have, they've got even a year up to 20, 30 years. Line them up, take pictures of them, and have society say, okay, I want you to pick who the addicts are. I bet you they wouldn't pick every single person. Mm-hmm. It's that stigma again. And I believe as we work on getting rid of that stigma, I think we'll even see more growth, right? We're going to see more people open their eyes and probably say, what can I do to help?
Yeah. Oh, I absolutely think we have so much more ability to have the conversation.
Yeah.
And I would say, going back to what I said is when I was struggling with an eating disorder, did not know I had a substance use disorder. I just lived privately. I didn't want anybody to know how much I was suffering. And I think that that's where this conversation is if we talk about it and we bring it up, we're able to have people have more opportunity to come to say, I need help. And that's really what we're trying to do about changing stigma. And we need to do it in our healthcare system.
Yes.
Because a lot of what we've done is we've neglected, intervening so much earlier when somebody's struggling with a substance use. And again, that label of, I don't want to confront somebody to call them an addict. Well, we shouldn't be calling them an addict in the first place. It's somebody who has developed a substance use problem because of, however, it's available. It's just available, right? That's really the cause. It's available, and they come from some place where there has been some suffering.
Yes.
Trauma, mental and emotional. And it's not the entire cause, but it's also something that is there. So you can develop a substance use disorder because you have an undiagnosed or an undetermined mental health condition. It could be depression, anxiety. I mean, marijuana and alcohol worked great for my anxiety disorder. And then when I started stimulants, I had more anxiety, but I had to use more of the, more of the downers to help me feel better.
You play that roller coaster to level yourself out.
Yeah, and next thing you know, I have a full-blown substance use disorder and addiction. Yeah. And I never thought I did because I was such a nice person. I was not being nice anymore. I saw myself differently. And so, and I didn't want to be identified with people who they were talking badly about, because that isn't how I saw myself. Though I behaved badly Trust me, I behaved badly during that time that I was using. But it was this altered state and desperation and fear and anxiety and insecurity that was all mixed in with substance use. Yeah. And that's most of what we're dealing with. We're trying to just escape some suffering. Yeah. And we need to help each other get through the suffering and lessen, the damage, which is substances that hurt somebody, and helping them where they're at, treating them kindly. A person who may still continue to use does not need to, don't treat them badly. You want to leave the door open for them to feel like there is help and support for them right where they're at.
And go ahead. You had something.
I want to just make this clear. USARA will take people that are still using.
Yes, if you come in and say, I'd like to, we call it because we're not treatment, we're not a clinical, we don't diagnose anybody, but most people when they're struggling, they know. I don't need a diagnosis to know that. I mean, it helped me when I got into treatment that, you do have a disorder. It helped me get some clinical help. But I also knew a lot of people who have also been to treatment many times because substance use disorders and mental health, they're chronic conditions that we have to get help for so that we can maintain recovery and keep some of the symptoms in remission. Or addressed over time. And we have medication to do that now. For instance, opiate use disorders. It's really hard to get off an opiate. And so having a medication to replace my cravings and also the symptoms of getting sick when I go through withdrawal is helping me get the appropriate treatment and the appropriate support on a medication as I begin to get better. And that's really how we have to look at it in a very medical way. So as you look at, when we say that person, if they come in, we'll accept them when they're still using, it's like, absolutely, because we're saying, how can we help you? And there's lots of things that could help. And then we talk to them about where is it they want to start, because a lot of time you can't bulldoze in on them, and sometimes treatment is that intervention that needs to happen, especially when somebody is in a serious crisis, and harming themselves kind of beyond their own capacity to stop that. I think that's where I ended up. I was harming myself and I did not have the capacity to stop it, so I needed a more serious intervention. And sometimes people still have resources, and that's where we do outpatient treatment. It can be recovery coaching and a therapist. I think that's a good combination for, re-engaging your recovery or long-term recovery. And there's a lot of options for people to get better. And actually, many people get better on their own. There's a lot of folks who said, I never went to treatment, but I stopped using because it was causing me harm. So, we need to hear their voices as well, right?
And there's a lot of new things, and I think you just said it here just a little bit ago. A lot of new things that are coming up that they're finding is helping a lot of people. We just had American Wellness on our show a couple, 3 or 4 weeks ago on our live show. And there's a product that was developed back in 1945 that helps with cravings. And it's now finally just coming to surface.
What is it?
That's one of those.
It's vitamin B.
Injections,
it's the intravenous, and they had a gentleman. They sent me a link, and there's this gentleman who got out of recovery, and the cravings for him were just. He was just struggling, and he heard about this new program or this new drug, or it's not even a drug, it's a vitamin. He's like, well, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And he finally one day walked in and started talking to him about it, and he says after a second treatment, he's like, my cravings are gone. They're just gone. And he's like, I can't even believe this is possible, because he's like constantly, every hour, every minute, every second. And he was fighting it because he didn't want to go back to using. Right. And so there's a lot of different things that are happening out there that, I think possibly have been around for a long time, but I think for some reason the blanket's been thrown over it, and now the blanket's off and people are starting to come out. And maybe it's because addiction is so widespread, until I started sharing my story, what was going on with my wife and I had people that I've known for 6-7 years pulling me off to the side and going, I don't know if you knew it, but I used to be an addict. And I'm like, what? Are you kidding me? it's everywhere.
Yeah.
So, it's good to have resources like USARA, and we're coming up on our time here, but it's great to have places like USARA, and I've seen so much what they've done. I mean, I remember the first time Brad from Resilience Talk Network and I sat down and had a meeting with Evan, and started learning a little bit more about what you guys did, and then of course, Janan gets involved with USARA, and she goes there and works with Tiffany, and Tiffany's been great for her, and it's just so cool to see how many people are there really to grab your hand and help walk you through it, no matter what it is that you're going through, because guaranteed there's someone in that building that's gone through exactly what you're going through.
Right. It is the connection, and because you're talking about vitamin B. I think just like human beings, there is no one remedy. There's no one remedy that's gonna cure this.
Yeah, there's not a magic pill.
There's no one system. There's no let's find this. But we do have lots of things that people will try and may or may not benefit from. And my philosophy is don't give up. Keep trying. Keep trying. One of the things that I love it. Dr. Jen Plum says with Utah naloxone, stay alive. It's important to stay alive. It's important that you continue to be close enough to support that when it's really difficult and you're struggling, you actually can reach out and say, I need help. And sometimes that's hard too, because when I'm in my, if I'm in my substance use, I might be pushing back on the help that's being offered to me. And it's okay. That's why we want to leave the door available for people to say, I know. And your suffering may be so great that you're not in a place to stop using, to arrest what you're doing to medicate. But we're here. And so that's really what we want to try to do. And with peer coaching, families do it for family members. The family support is so important because most people, most people have a family. Some do not. And then recovery community becomes their family until they also can reconnect with their family of origin or family of their children. I mean, so there's so many different ways to bring that healing back, and I really think that's what recovery is. It's about healing, and it's about our wellness, and because everybody wants to feel better. I mean, we want to feel better, and we want to feel well without the harmful effects of substances. Yeah. And I think that even with the lives lost, people who have lost their life from addiction, a lot of times they were in recovery for a long time too. My sister was one of those people. She was in recovery and helped others for 14 years, and I've lost a lot of people who have really been wonderful at helping others in recovery, and it reached a point in their life where they struggled, and substance use does have a lethal effect if we don't remedy it. And so the remedies are vast, and I think we help people find the remedy that's going to work best for them. And that's why that guy, right frame of mind, right support, right intervention, and he was able to sustain his recovery. And you have to continue to work on it, which I still work on mine. I find my way to help sustain my well-being. And we could talk for days on recovery absolutely. And all this. And I'm glad I want to say is thank you so much for bringing people to the mic, to tell their stories, to talk about all the different ways they can that they may contribute to recovery, or how it happened for them, or the kind of resources they can offer other people. I mean, it's important that we continue to talk about this and bring this up into the public awareness.
Amen. That is for sure. And just like I've shared on a story before, I went to an AA meeting with Janan. This guy gets up, gets his 10, 15, 20-year chip, and he says he hits his knees and thanks God every day for making him an alcoholic. And I thought the guy had his head up his rear end. I'm like, you're effing nuts, dude. Now that I've gone through all the stuff that we have gone through, I get it. I'm very, very grateful. And it sounds weird, but I'm very grateful that we've gone through what we've gone through as a couple, because we have found our why through all this, and we know where we want to go and what we want to do to help other people, and just so blessed that I was able to be introduced to someone like Brad, who's the owner of Resilience Talk Network, and for him to have a place for me to come in and start doing this with me. I mean, he gave me some training and some coaching, but yeah, I was still really green and not really knowing which direction to go. And now to see how much it's built. I mean, we're coming up on 2 years.
Wow.
2 years and 40 something shows already. And it's just, and we do a live show, and it's just incredible. It's just been such a huge blessing. So, one last thing. And I think you've probably even said it quite a few times, because you've thrown some really good nuggets out there, Mary Jo. What is something that's very important that you think our listeners should gather from all this that we've talked about today?
Look in that camera.
Wow.
Look at Janan's over here directing.
She's being my coach.
The camera.
She's being my coach.
Yeah, she is.
What I think is if you are a person who has been dealing with substance use as a person yourself, your own substance use, you have a family member maybe that's struggling, I think to get some information and support and a safe person to talk about it with, so that you can begin to start your own healing, because it is substance use disorders and addiction. They do impair our lives in such a way that we do get sicker. And what we know is that there are a lot of ways that we can recover. And so I tell people, never give up trying to help yourself or to help or even to help someone else. I think sometimes we have to step back in helping somebody when we're beginning to get harmed. But I don't give up hope on somebody that I may have had to step back from. That's the other thing. So I think share your recovery with somebody who may need to hear your story. Share your recovery, if you're so inclined, with somebody who may need to hear that people with addiction do get better. And, share with legislators or somebody who has some decision-making power about a need in our community that will help people to get better who have suffered from substance use and mental health. So I think voices, have a voice, use your voice, empower your own voice to be part of the solution and part of the healing.
Nailed it.
Amen, yeah.
Nailed it. Do you want to say ditto?
Ditto.
Because I was going to ask you.
I
if
always
you have
say ditto.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was,
Yeah, that
I
was
liked
great. Gosh, just got a tickle in my throat here. Mary Jo, again, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be with us. And I mean, it's been an honor to have you here
really
with us today.
Thank you very much. Can I do one last plug?
Absolutely.
If anybody's hearing this, February 16th at the state capitol, we have the Rally for Recovery. It will be hosted by USARA and NAMI Utah, the National Alliance of Mental Illness. And no, that's good. Thank you, because I'll forget sometimes. And we'll have lots of different organizations and people who will come together at the Rotunda in the Capitol, 4:00 on February 16th. We do a walk to remember those lives that we've lost from substance use and addiction. And then we also will be in the Capitol where legislators will come down. They see the power of the people and the power of those of us who are working on our recovery, so that others can recover and we continue to provide the resources and support. So it really is one of those events where we are very visible as a community. So
I love that, and thanks for sharing that, because we will definitely be there, because I want to start getting in some ears of some legislation, because again, the system's broken. Things need to change.
Yeah, we just need to tell them what's working.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah, gosh, and we will make sure. So we will make sure all of USARA's information is on the show. So guys, just look for the caption there, and you'll see that we'll have their website, their phone number. So if anyone's interested, you'll know how to contact them. So we'll definitely make sure all that's there. Okay. Gosh, I don't think there's anything else, man. This has just been a really good show. Thank you for sharing all this information, and thank you for everything that you're doing. I get emotional talking about it. Seems like every single time.
I know.
But again, just
your gratitude,
just thank you. Thank you for doing what you're doing, because we need people like you and Janan and so many others to help us get through this. So
Yeah, and your inspiration in saying I want to be part of this is really our movement. It's our recovery movement. It's our community growing.
Yeah.
And that's I love
what
to
it's
watch
all
it.
about,
Yeah, that's what
yep.
it's all about.
Yeah. If you would have asked me 2 years ago, 3 years ago, if I'd be doing what I'd be doing, I'm like, yeah, hell no. Now here I am getting knee deep in it, and I'm very grateful that I am.
Yeah, when I started going in and out of AA, he just like, whatever, that's your thing, and you never ever. So it's like, when was it, a couple months ago, I was like, thank you for finally, what did I say?
First stepping or coming into the recovery world with me.
Coming into the recovery world, because I always felt like, I was this person that was in between everything.
Right.
I'm trying to get recovery, and he's over here saying, I don't give a shit what you do, pretty much.
We need our family.
Pretty
and
much.
Our family is in recovery now, right?
Yeah.
Family members come into their own recovery.
Yeah, and I think that's something that should become a thing too. Just one last thing. I keep saying that, but one last thing, that when a family member or loved one goes in recovery, the family needs to go into recovery as well, because if they're not understanding what this person's going through, you put them back in that environment, it's just going to be toxic again, because that's exactly what happened with us. Every time she got out of it, it was the same old bullshit in my eyes, not understanding. And now that I understand a lot more about it, now it's like, oh my gosh, I wish I could have had all these tools before.
It helps. It really does help. It helps the healing for yourself as well as
absolutely,
for your
family
marriage
members.
and
so. Everything. Well, guys, thank you again for being with us. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you to Mary Jo and Janan for being here with us. Thank you to all our sponsors, all our listeners, all our guest co-hosts, Resilience Talk Network. And you guys know me. I could sit here and say thank you for the next 20 minutes for everyone, because none of this would be possible if it... I don't know why I get so emotional every time I talk about this stuff, but none of this would be possible if it wasn't for you guys. So thank you, and remember this: addiction is giving up everything for one thing. Recovery is giving up one thing for everything. We're out.